Hey everyone, I hope everyone out there is doing well. For those of you who have never seen these videos before, my name is Derek Royden. I regularly write for a website called nationofchange.org, a progressive website. I recommend that you check it out. Now for today's story, we're going to be concentrating on an article from The Guardian by the environment editor Damien Carrington. It's called Terror Being Waged on Wildlife, Leaders Warn. Before we get to today's article, I want to mention two other pieces of climate-related news. Excuse me. In the last week, the UN released a report that said we have exactly about 12 years left to try and reverse the course we're on before things get really, really bad in terms of climate change. Also, the Trump administration also released a report, apparently about 500-page report, which hidden in the contents of this report was the fact that basically the Trump administration doesn't necessarily deny climate change, but rather says that there's nothing they can do about it, that the average temperatures are going to go up about 7 degrees, and that we'll just have to deal with it when the time comes, or of course, we won't have to deal with it. Our grandchildren, maybe possibly children, will have to deal with the effects of catastrophic climate change. But sometimes when we're talking about environmental issues, and I'm really glad The Guardian does a really good job in their coverage of the environment. I'm not particularly fond of their political coverage, but they're one of the few outlets out there that's really covering these stories. And of course, as important as dealing with the issue of climate change is perhaps even a bigger issue, although it's, you can't really say these things, but is the loss of biodiversity, which is the focus of this article from Thursday, the 4th of October, so it's about a week old. It begins. Humanity is waging a war of terror on wildlife across the globe, according to the head of a world-leading research institute who was previously a counter-terrorism expert for the UK government. Dominic Jeremy, Director General of the Zoological Society of London, or ZSL, also spent years in Afghanistan supporting the fight against terrorism until leaving his post of UK ambassador in 2017. Coming to ZSL, Jeremy is quoted as saying, "I have a front row seat on a different kind of war, the war on wildlife," he said in an article for The Guardian. You can find the article, this article, and the links that are in it below. It is a war with catastrophic impacts on people and animals. While war and terror atrocities make daily headlines, the horrors being waged on wildlife slide under the radar, said Jeremy, ahead of a global summit on tackling the illegal wildlife trade in London in October. Other leaders are urging rapid action, with Gabon's President Ali Bongo calling the crisis a blight on humanity, and UK Environment Secretary, Michael Gove, saying the massive global problem needs the same scale of international response being taken to fight climate change. There's some irony in this. First, that Gove is, of course, a Conservative minister, but also that he's implying that there's some kind of global effort to fight climate change, which really just at the present time doesn't seem to be true. There's a lot of talking about climate change, but in terms of actual action, we're really not seeing much. More pipelines than ever are being built, more factory farms than ever are being built, and after what we saw in the Carolinas with the last big storm, I can't remember the name of it, where literally thousands upon thousands of pigs were killed or left to die, and millions of chickens especially, but other domesticated birds were also left behind to die, and it just shows that a complete lack of compassion on the parts of the people who run these businesses. There were previous storms in the Carolinas that caused massive numbers of deaths, but no actions were taken to alleviate this problem, and these animals suffered horrible deaths, maybe possibly worse deaths than they would have suffered otherwise. Illegal hunting and the destruction of wild habitat has resulted in the start of what many scientists consider the sixth mass extinction of life to occur in the Earth's 4 billion year history. Over 80% of all mammals and half of plants are thought to have been lost since the rise of human civilization. Wildlife crime harms both people and animals. Jeremy said, "The annihilation of wildlife by organized criminal gangs is violent, bloody, corrupt, and insidious. It robs communities of their resources, their independence, their opportunities, and their dignity. And we are all losers as the creatures with which we share this planet are pillaged to extinction. 100 million sharks are killed every year, mostly for their fins, and 20,000 African elephants for their ivory." The inability of people to have any empathy for animal life, for wildlife in general, is a huge problem. We are learning more and more, scientists are learning more and more about the complex emotional lives of animals. And it's very important that we move towards conferring some rights on animals. Now, I know we live in a situation where we have a hard enough time preserving the rights of people, particularly women, but we need to extend rights to non-human living things, especially other mammals, but also just life in general. So the article goes on. Losses have been greatest in recent decades, Jeremy said, with a 58% decline in wildlife since 1970. That's like losing the entire human population of Asia from the world. The London gathering of leaders is a critical opportunity, he said. This is our moment for action. The UK government is going to be hosting the summit, which will be the biggest yet, and aims to ramp up action against wildlife traffickers and build momentum towards a critical meeting of world nations at the UN Convention on Biological Diversity in 2020. Gove said, "It's a massive global problem. The world collectively has taken action to set ambitious goals to deal with climate change, and I think we need to show a similar level of ambition once again," I dispute this, "when it comes to making sure we safeguard wildlife and biodiversity. It will be difficult to explain to our children and grandchildren if we don't take action." Among the projects being supported by the UK are training for customs officers to tackle trade in pangolins, the world's most trafficked animals, creating forest-friendly cocoa plantations in Liberia, and protecting Sumatran, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, tiger habitat in Indonesia. A major UN-backed report in March found that human destruction of nature is rapidly eroding the world's capacity to provide food, water, and security to billions of people, and poses risks on the same scale as global warming. Bongo, who will be among the heads of state attending the summit, said, "The illegal trafficking of wildlife is a blight on humanity. This trade, estimated to be worth some 1 or 17 billion pounds per year, is big business run by ruthless networks. My country, Gabon, is on the front line of the battle to end this trade." He said the Elephant Protection Initiative in Africa has grown from 5 nations in 2018 to 18 now, and was not only focused on anti-poaching, but also developing sustainable livelihoods for those living alongside wildlife. We need to convince farmers who live alongside elephants, and whose crops are often damaged by them, that these animals can be creators, not just destroyers of economic wealth. And this is the thing, is animals, of course, and people, especially larger animals, will come into conflict. But as we, here in North American terms, as we went after wolves, we don't realize the effect that we're having, especially when we kill kind of the top predator in an ecosystem. We don't know what effect we're having on animals and species we have yet to discover, let alone insects like butterflies. Zach Goldsmith, MP, appointed as UK government champion for the summit, said, "It matters in and of itself when you lose iconic species, when you see whole ecosystems being annihilated, but it matters in a very direct way to humans as well. If you wipe out ecosystems, you plunge people into awful poverty. We have seen some great initiatives, but are going backwards, not forwards, which is depressing reality," he said. "This is why this conference is so important." Then they quote Tony Juniper, who's executive director of the World Wildlife Foundation in the UK. "The destruction of nature and disappearance of our wildlife is one of the greatest threats facing the human race. And it's not just about the extinction of rhinos or tigers on the other side of the world. It's about the disappearing birds, butterflies, and other animals on our own doorsteps. And of course, I'd mentioned in a video before, I think it was more than 60% of the world's birds are domesticated. Our agricultural processes or our agricultural industries have had an enormous effect on the environment. This is beyond just fossil fuel or mineral extraction. It's embedded in the system in which we live to see ourselves as outside of and above nature. And this has been going on for a very long time, and it really needs to stop. We really need to start seeing ourselves as animals within this system who can actually have a really positive effect because of course of our large brains. So I guess that's it for today. Everyone just to maybe think about a little bit more about biodiversity and how we can help to make the world a better place simply through our own actions, maybe driving less and riding a bike, and of course these are more things that would affect global climate change rather than ecosystem loss. But I really believe that we have to kind of try to empower ourselves and of course to lead by example so that others can see that it's actually really easy to live the kind of life that is less harmful to our friends in the natural world. And I do see them as our friends. So have a great day, and always remember,